Hi Capricorn, welcome to your June 2020 Astro Alchemy. It's Rena here, so this is a month where it's going to be interesting because it's building up to a lunar eclipse in your sign happening in early July. So in June, there's an eclipse in your opposite sign of Cancer, a solar eclipse. And this is going to take place in your seventh house of relationships. And actually, many of you will probably have this in your sixth house, now that I think about it, because it's at 0 degrees of Cancer. So unless you happen to be born on maybe December 21st or whenever, each year it's different, maybe December 22nd or 23rd. Whenever it's 0 degrees in the year you were born, then maybe it will be in your first house. In your seventh house, but otherwise it'll probably be in your sixth house, which is more of the work area. But that can be very good for people who want to perhaps have an opportunity for other employment. So let me just start at the beginning, because the Sun and Venus are both in Gemini. And for you, Gemini is the sixth house. Now, in case you're confused, because I was talking about Cancer, I was really speaking about the sixth house with the solar eclipse, because when you have a transit at 0 degrees of a sign, it's going to be on the cusp with the sign before it. So the sixth house is very activated for you in June. And this is the house of health and the workplace and the work that you actually do. Now, you ruled the 10th house of career. And that is more of what your talents are being demonstrated to the world, your reputation, how other people are seeing you, do these things. And so I always call that the house of glory, because it's like you're getting that attention for what you do. The sixth house to me is just the work itself. So it can describe the nature of the work. So for instance, when people have Saturn in the sixth house, whether it be in their natal chart or in a transit, they may be working very hard. They may have a very good work ethic, but it may be kind of like laborious types of work, very hard work and things like that, or maybe that feeling of having a very strong sense of duty about work, or working overtime, whatever it means for that particular situation. But the Sun and Venus being here, to me, is a very good sign, because these are expansive types of, the Sun to me is more energizing or positive in general. Maybe more than saying expansive, I would say it's positive. And you being an earth sign, Capricorn, you are the kind of person who resonates with what the sixth house represents. So this could make you much more receptive to your health and maybe even changing it. Venus is retrograding in this house. So this can, if we look at it from an internal point of view with the retrograde, this can even be something connected to how you value your health. So even the word evaluate could come into play here, evaluating your health in some way. And I wouldn't even be surprised if for some of you, this involves also the type of work that you're doing and how that impacts your health. Are you working long hours? Does that make it hard for you to sleep? Get enough sleep? Are you somebody who is in a stressful environment? And another thing too is that some kind of money matter could come into play when it deals with a retrograde. Maybe you're negotiating a higher salary, or maybe there's money that is owed to you from your place of employment. On the 25th of the month, Venus goes direct, so something gets resolved, and going into July, things start to shake out, settle down, and then when Venus is direct, I mean, that's good too, because you have this kind of harmonious energy in this area of the workplace. Mars is in Pisces until the 27th, and this is harmonious for you because Pisces is water in your earth, and that forms a sextile. And Pisces is your third house. So this can be especially energizing the area that has to do with teaching and learning. This may be a more active area, communicating in the month of June. And it's interesting because Gemini rules that house. So you have the Gemini energy just by virtue of it being the time of Gemini for most of the month, and Venus is there too. But then on top of that, you have Mars in the house of Gemini, so it's going to also act in that kind of Gemini way, because Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So the third house deals with the mind, and the mind, and also, of course, your speech is connected to that because it's communication. So this can be somebody who is more active in learning, more active in speaking or teaching, and perhaps this is connected to a type of work that you're doing. Actually, I'm going to bring in I want to talk about the lunar eclipse first, because I will say, as I said before, that the vast majority of you are going to have that solar eclipse in the sixth house, and that may be a lot of work opportunities. And so perhaps it is in the area of teaching and learning, or especially teaching, but also at lower grades, not necessarily university, but for whether it's online teaching, tutoring, or if you are learning, it could be even some kind of certificate that you're trying to receive. I think that in that particular case, it would be to advance your opportunities in a current job, or perhaps make you more employable by having more qualifications or credentials. So the lunar eclipse is on the 5th of June, and this is at 15 degrees of Sag. Sag is your 12th house, and just like before, as I've said before, I mean, depending on what degree you have Sag in. So if, for instance, you're in the last 14 degrees of Capricorn, so, from 16 to 29 degrees, this may actually be in your 11th house. And that might have more to do with making a dream come true, or some kind of change in your friendships and associations with groups. But in the 12th house, this can be really good for any kind of karmic release. There was something when I was looking at my own information, and I saw that I'm going to have a lunar eclipse in the 12th house, and I was really looking forward to that. I think this is a really great thing to have, because a lot of times this is the house of self-undoing, And sometimes people can be fairly, pretty effective in life, but they have like a blind spot, or they have some behavior that they feel is almost like beyond their control. And who knows, it could have a karmic connection to it. And because eclipses are change agents that can, potentially happen in a very, in a way that is beyond our own control, or our conscious control, it can make it easier to let go of something if you have a lunar eclipse. And in the 12th house, you may not even know what you're letting go of, but you feel this sense of something being like a weight being lifted from you, or ties to certain people not being as strong, and therefore you're able to distance yourself from certain people. So I think that's a good way to clean house. And, like I said, you're going to have an eclipse in your sign next month, and then that will be your conscious self. This is more of the unconscious self, or the karma, or, your past lives. And on the 18th, we have a Mercury retrograde. Yet again, now this is going to be in Cancer, your opposite sign. For people who are, now this is the 7th house. So this is the house of relationships, marriage, one-on-one relationships, or significant others. But even if you have clients, this could be the case. So make sure that you are on top of those connections, because there may be miscommunication with somebody. 7th house can be legal affairs, and Mercury can be documents. So if you have any kind of legal affairs, make sure that you are double checking documents. If you're, this is during the time of the Venus retrograde, and Venus rules that 7th house. So if you are dealing with somebody from your past, Mercury can even bring people from, you could be talking to people from your past as well. So this double retrograde of Venus and Mercury, you might really be doing it. But in the 7th house, for sure, maybe even an ex that was very significant in your life. And just remember that if that other person contacts you, that you may feel like, wow, this is great. But I think that it's always good to be cautious, because there was a reason that you broke up, and you should never forget that things don't just magically get better. There has to be conscious understanding of why the relationship fell apart, and what is going to change, what is going to be different. But I think that sometimes people do change. I don't think that it's wrong to believe in people's ability to change. So the solar eclipse is on the 21st. Now, the other thing that's important about the solar eclipse is that it's at 0 degrees of Cancer. So there's that sense of not only being a very powerful new moon, but almost like this blank slate that you can create whatever it is that you want. And in Cancer, we could look at the area of relationships, but it's also going to be very much about your work. You could look at it also as, if you're looking for more clients, how can I position myself to have more clients based on what it is that I do? Maybe there's something else that I can offer them, and maybe it can even be more personalized, so they feel like they are special. And that's kind of what I was getting at with the 7th house. When you're dealing with clients, is not, where they don't feel like they're just a number. And so you may have more opportunities for clients, but in the 6th house, even more opportunities for work. And if you're not happy where you are, that could be especially good news, you know. But the other thing that I like about this is that it's coming on the heels of the solstice. In Northern Hemisphere, the summer solstice. And so that's a powerful period too, because that's like the equinoxes when the sun is going into a cardinal sign and signaling change. So I think that those 2 days, the 20th and the 21st, are really awesome. Even though we are just embarking on a Mercury retrograde, but that can be, I think that can be really good for meditation, to tell you the truth, especially since this isn't a water sign. And speaking of water signs, on the 23rd, we're having Neptune retrograding, Neptune being in its own sign of Pisces. So we have Mars in Pisces, and now we have Neptune retrograding in that 3rd house. And so since you have Neptune for these last, gosh, I don't know how many years, maybe like 8 or 7. I can't remember when it went into, maybe 8 or 9 years, either 2011 or 2012, in Pisces, in that 3rd house, for a sign like Capricorn, that has made you a lot more mystical, a lot less linear. I wonder how many of you really feel that way. But Neptune retrograde is kind of like pulling back the curtain and, you know, bringing you back down to reality in this 3rd house. So more practical knowledge. If you've had any kind of dreams of writing, you know, like Neptune retrograde can make a person sometimes disillusioned. If you've been like, man, what I wrote was really great, and then you read it again during Neptune retrograde, and you're like, wow, this isn't, you know, I don't think this is as good as I thought it was. But, you know, obviously, you would have to be a writer to begin with. If you're just trying to do it and you really don't believe that you have talent in the first place, then it's not really what I'm saying. The people that do have that ability may question it at this time, but it's also a good way to edit, you know, because with Mercury retrograde, that's good for editing anyway. But this is really a great time to see it in a more realistic way. And because sometimes when you're in that process, I'm a writer myself, and so when you're in the process of writing, you're getting into the zone, but you have to edit, and you're more of the linear mind, where you're kind of like seeing if your writing is tight enough, if it's even the proofreading, you know, all of that stuff that plays into it that is not creative for the most part. It's more like logical, linear, and things like that. And on the 25th, Venus goes direct, and this is in that 6th house. So the 6th house is really featured here, and the 3rd house too. And the 3rd house can be your mind being very active with Mars there, and maybe even your voice is very strong. Mars is very brave, so if you have some kind of something that you have to put out into the world, you may be doing it with an uncharacteristically bold voice. Not sure What that would be specifically might be different for each person, but kind of like that warrior energy, but in a more of a mental area of life. Okay, that's what I have for you, Capricorn, and I hope that this resonated. If you would like a personal reading, please check out my ordering page. I have it linked below. Take care. Bye.